The gifts that we give every day that are non-tangible are the most important gifts that we can give in life. The things that you can't see, the things that are not purchased with money. And I hope and pray that you will do that in your life with your mothers. If you still have your mom, please use every opportunity you can to express your love to her. And if your mother is not here today, if she's already gone home, then you are the matriarch of your family and should be honored by all those who follow you. And with that said, I'm going to preach a few minutes this morning from Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. And I want to talk to you this morning about how to love your mother. How to love your mother. Somebody says, well, Mother's Day is kind of one of those write-off days where you just kind of get through it. And it's not an easy day to preach, to be honest with you. It's very difficult. Probably more difficult than any other day in the year for me, truthfully, because not everybody's mother is the same. And we have to be very careful about putting people in categories or building a certain framework around a particular individual, because that may not be your experience or my experience. And so we draw from those things and we say, wow, that was a bummer. And I know people that don't go to church on Mother's Day because they can't handle it. They just don't want to be there. But I'm glad you ladies are here today. I'm glad all of our moms are here this morning. And the only thing I regret is that my mother's not here. I very seldom ever have spent a Mother's Day with my mom. I've pastored now for over 40 years, and outside of the first few years of our lives when my parents were living close to us, I can think of only maybe 2 or 3 occasions in the last 32 years that I've ever been with my mother on Mother's Day. And so it's a long-distance call early in the morning. It's a gift through the mail or going to see her after the event. And you don't know how to appreciate the fact that your mother lives close to you, if she does live close to you. And if you don't, I sympathize with you because I know exactly what you're going through because I've been through it my whole life. But I want to spend the next few minutes this morning of telling every one of us how we can love our mothers. And I hope you'll be blessed with this. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Honor your father and mother. So how do you love your mother? And everyone has their own context this morning of what it was like growing up in your house, what it's like even now as your mom is older and you're older. Perhaps you're adults, both of you. You may have children, grandchildren, and all of that. So how do you love your mother? It reminds me of a story. Motherhood is not easy. How many of y'all think it's easy to be a mama? Nobody, because it's not easy. I heard this story and I want to just tell you about it. There was this mother shopping in Walmart pushing a cart, and the baby was in the cart just screaming his head off. And as she walked down the aisle, she would say, now calm down, Ellen. We're going to be all right, Ellen. And as she continued to go around the deal, she came to the checkout counter and said, Ellen, we're going to be home in just a few minutes. It's okay. And the checkout counter at the clerk, she said to her, ma'am, I just admire the patience you have with this child that is so upset that you would have such patience with him. And we said, well, how do you know? So, well, you kept telling him, telling Ellen, it's going to be all right. It's going to be okay. She said, ma'am, my name's Ellen. So are there any Ellens in the house? I guarantee you there's plenty of them. I heard this story years ago. You've probably heard it 1,000 times, but I got to share it with you because it's one of my favorites from James Dobson, way back in Focus on the Family days, back in the 70s. I found this story many years ago in one of his books, and it's a third grade response to what is a grandmother. You've all heard it, but let me read it again, so just bear with me. So what is a grandmother? Ask third graders. A grandmother is a lady who has no children of her own. She likes other people's little kids. And grandmothers don't have anything to do except to just be there. Grandmothers are old, and so they shouldn't play too hard. and they should never run. It's enough if they just drive us to the market where the pretend horse is and have lots of quarters ready. If they take us for a walk, they should slow down and pass things like pretty flowers and caterpillars on the ground. And they should never say, hurry up. Usually grandmothers are fat, but not too fat to tie your shoes. They wear glasses, and they can take their teeth and gums out. And when they read to us, they don't skip parts of the story or mind if we want to read the same story again and again. Now, a grandfather is a man grandmother. But he goes for walks with boys, and they talk about stuff like fishing and stuff like that. And lastly, everybody should try to have a grandmother, especially if you don't have a TV. Because they're the only grown-ups who have time. I want all the grandmothers to stand, or great-grandmothers. Would you stand? All the grandmothers and great-grandmothers to stand in this building. Come on, let's give it up for these precious ladies here. Awesome. Hallelujah. How do you tell your mother, I love you? How do you tell her, I love you? First of all, I believe we should tell her verbally. We should say it. You've all heard the story about the husband who married a wife, and he told her on the day he got married he loved her, and for 35 years he never told her again. And one day she was crying, and somebody said, what's wrong? She said, my husband never tells me he loves me. And so this person went to her husband and said, why don't you ever tell her you love her? He said, I already told her I loved her, and if I change my mind, I'll tell her. It's not enough to tell your mother or your wife you love her once in a great while. Do you know there are people, honestly, who are grown today that have never had their parents to tell them that they love them? Did you know that? There are people who never heard those three words out of their parents' mouth. I love you. They may have demonstrated it. They may have been there for them. May have stayed in a home. They may have done a lot of things. But to say it out loud, they never did. And I will tell you, I believe one of the saddest things about life is that we go through our whole life and we don't express even the words, I love you, to someone. Now, I know the word I love you is a cheap word. If you don't demonstrate it, it doesn't do any good. But they need to hear it. There's never a time that I speak to my mother that I don't tell her I love her. Not ever a time I can remember that I don't tell her, Mom, I love you. If we're leaving their house, if I'm on the phone, whatever I'm doing, I tell my dad the same, Dad, I love you. You say, well, that is cheesy. No, it's not cheesy. It's important to me because I was raised that way. Some of you weren't. Some of you came from a harsh background. Your parents were not loving, tender kind of people. And that's okay. We're not pointing fingers at them today. But you need to love them with words. We need to tell our children we love them. We need to tell our parents we love them. We need to tell our spouses, we love you. I love you. I read this story from Dear Abby many years ago, and it goes like this. This man says, I enlisted shortly after Pearl Harbor. 36 days later, I was on my way to the Philippines. En route to Philippines, it fell to the Japanese, so we were rerouted to Australia. 11 days after we landed, I met the most beautiful girl in the world. On our first date, I told her I was going to marry her. 18 months later, on R&R, we got married. Now more than 57 years have passed, 2 children, and my beloved Mary died 5 days before Christmas. Although we agreed that our ashes were to be scattered over the mountains, I cannot bring myself to part with hers. While Mary was alive, she would frequently say, you don't know how much I love you. And I'd reply, likewise. I never said, I love you, Mary. Now her ashes are on my dresser, where I tell her several times a day, how much I love her, but she cannot hear me. Although I wrote poetry to her, I could not bring myself to say the 3 words that she wanted to hear most of anything: I love you. As my dearest was dying and we were going into a coma, I told her, I said, there aren't enough words to tell you how much I love you. And a few hours later, she whispered, not enough words, and she fell asleep. The reason I'm writing this is to urge men to express their feelings while their loved ones are alive, because the day will come when they can't hear you. People need to hear us say, I love you. Now, please excuse me for being personal. It's not easy for some people to say those kinds of affectionate words. It's hard for some men or even some women to say, I love you. It's difficult for us to get them out because that's not our personality. That's not the way we're wired. But the people that are most valuable in your life need to know and need to hear the words, I love you. So please tell them while you can, because they need to hear it. Secondly, how do you love your mother? We need to love her physically. I was going through my photos on my computer the other day, and I had some duplicates, and I was erasing some of the duplicates off of some files. And I came across a file of 2 young women, one in her 40s, one in her early 50s, who were leaning over a bed, kissing a woman in bed who was dying. I was the pastor of that family when I was in Stanford, Texas many years ago. Marvette was in her early 20s. Sandra was about 9 years old. Frances was one of my wife's most dear friends. Many of you have met Frances Cheek. She's a big, big, heavy-set lady. And every ounce of her was packed with love and joy. She didn't have an easy life. She had a very difficult life. But she loved her kids. Her son was killed in a wreck, or killed a few years ago as a police officer, and died. And she had 2 daughters left. And a couple of years ago, I preached Frances' funeral, and the girls sent me this picture. And Marvette and Frances are bending over their mother's bed, and they are kissing her on the face as she lays there dying. And I thought about that touch, what it meant to touch her with their lips, to kiss their dying mother. I thought about a story I read years ago about a librarian who did a test, and kids would come in and out of the library, and he would hand them, or she would hand the books over to the people and never touch them. And they did a survey on the people who liked that library for a while, and then she decided, I'm going to touch every person who comes to check out the desk. Just touch him on the hand, just make some physical touch with him. Nothing affectionate, just a touch. And the amazing results were these. Over 65% of the people said that they would go back to that library because they felt welcome there. They felt they were cared for, just because the person at the desk touched their hand. Do not underestimate the power of touch. For those of you whose love language is physical touch, you know very well what it means. I'll tell you how we know you're a physical touch person is because you're always touching somebody. You can't shake somebody's hand, you got to pat them on the shoulder. You're always walking by somebody, popping them on the back of the head or something if it's a boy. You're always touching them somewhere, just touching them on the arm. How you doing today? You know, and there's other people, how you doing today? Like you've got the plague, but you got those people who have the love language of physical touch. We normally demonstrate that by the way we act. We're always touching somebody. Jan's dad was a person like that. He's been gone now for almost 20 years, or a little over 20 years. Not quite 20 years. I'll get it right in a minute. But Abe never went into anybody's presence and he said, how are you, young man? And he grabbed you and pat you. We called him the patter. He'd pat everybody, right, Ma? He patted on everybody. He loved everybody, and he touched people. And everybody loved Abe. They'd see him coming, there's Abe Brash, and they'd go to him because he was a toucher. He always touched people. And I will tell you that you need to touch those that you love. They need physical contact. I go to Canoe Brook every week, and in that service, Donison Fay are always there, and Brother David's always there, and Jerry Walton there, and Terry Bowers is there. And is this not true? Every time we go out there, every little old lady and little man, they want to shake your hand. They all want to be touched. It's not for them to just enough say, how are you doing? They look for me as the pastor to come around to their table and touch them every time. I'll take them by the hand and pat them on the shoulder. How are you, Marie? How are you, Ernestine? How are you? How are you? And how are you? And I'll just spend some time. Nothing enormous, but you can just see their face light up when somebody touches them. They're not in a nursing home. They're in a retirement center. But seldom do their kids come because their kids are working or live off someplace. They look for every opportunity to just have someone to interact with them for a moment, just a physical touch. And they act like it's the greatest thing in the world for us to spend 45 minutes with them on a Wednesday morning. They cannot tell us enough. We are so glad you. Every week they clap. I've never been cheered when I come into a church like this. I walk into that building out there and there's 12 little old ladies. They'll go, he's here, he's here. I'm nothing. But it means so much to them for someone to give them time and to touch them in just a very small way. May I say this to everybody? This is not in my message, but let me just put a parenthesis here. Take time out for 2 seconds, and let me share this with you. The generation that's younger than me and this generation over here, most of you, you're missing an enormous gold mine by not asking your parents and grandparents especially to tell you about their story. You have no idea what you're missing about your family, about your history. One of the most wonderful moments I ever spent in my life was with my grandmother Smith. I called her Nanny. Nanny was in her early 80s. My parents have already outlived all my grandparents. They've already outlived their age. She was in her early 80s. And I remember she was sick, and it was one Mother's Day or a Christmas. I don't remember exactly the time frame, but I remember we were at Mom's for a couple of days. And after my grandfather passed away, she never stayed another night in her house. She lived with my mom the rest of her life, which was 2 years. And I was there one day, and I said, Nanny, I heard you tell me about the time when you got saved down in East Texas. Would you tell me again? I want to hear it. And I wish I had recorded it. I wish 1,000 times I had recorded it on a cassette or something back in those days. And she began to tell me her story of her spiritual journey. She was the first one in her family to receive the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And she got the Holy Ghost down in a cornfield in East Texas, down in the middle of nowhere, out by herself. Not in a service, out by herself praying, and God filled her with the Holy Spirit. She had a love for God that was unbelievable. My grandpa used to play for dances when he was a young adult. He'd play in the dance he'd play the guitar and dance around, and then he got saved, filled with the Holy Spirit. His life totally changed, and I never could imagine Poppy Smith ever being like that. I'm glad I knew that story. But here's what I challenge all of you to do. I think I told you this last year, and I hope somebody's doing something about it. But you need to sit down with your elders in your family. You need to let them tell you their story. And I mean sit there and listen, because there's something you need to know about. That you need to hear their struggles. You need to hear about the good times and the bad times. And you say, oh, they just want to reminisce. Bless God, let them reminisce and tell you their story. They didn't get to where they are by accident. They're there because they made up their mind somewhere in the past, years ago, to walk with Jesus and to serve God. And you look at them and say, I don't know how you got this far, Dad, Mom, and all this. Listen to their story and let them tell you about how they got to where they are today. Now then, I'll take time out. Recess is over. Back to the message. Your mother's the first person who ever touched you. She carried you 9 months in her womb. She wrapped you in her womb and gave you life. And when you were born, she cuddled you to her breast and she gave you suck. She nourished you and fed you, changed your diapers, burped you, got up at night with you, walked the floor with you, rocked you, groomed you, took her thumb and licked you and fixed your hair. We talked about that this morning in Sunday school. Oh yeah, that's the best comb there is a thumb. It'll fix anything. When you were little, you'd say, come give me sugar. And what would you do? You pucker up and you give her the biggest kiss, open mouth kiss in the world. Oh, I always turned my cheek to mine when he did this, and here's Mom, let him kiss him right in the mouth. You know what I'm saying? Crazy. Your mother would put up with anything to let you love her. Let me ask a question. What changed? What changed? Do you think because we're older now our mothers love us any less? Do you think they don't care anymore how you feel? Do you think they wouldn't be at your side if you were dying, if they could get there, if they could do anything, they would take your place? Let me tell you about a mother that was that way. Her name was Mary. And when her son is dying on a cross outside of Jerusalem, she's standing at the foot of his cross and in her heart wishing she was on that cross and he was in her shoes. She would have died for him that day. If they had told her, would you take his place, without a moment of hesitation, she would have said yes. And so would every mother in this room. There's not one of your kids, no matter how ornery, rambunctious, or difficult they were to raise, you would take their place in a heartbeat if it would give them more life and more time. Because that's the way you love them. Thirdly, we got to love our mothers patiently. Now, I'm not the greatest patient person in the whole world, as most of you know. And I have my weaknesses, and most of you know that too. If you've been around me very long, you know there's things that I don't do well. There's some things I do pretty good. But patience has never been my greatest virtue because I want it done, and I want it done right, and I want it done now, and you know how it is. We just busy getting. I'm a task-oriented person. I love people, but I'm very task-oriented. I like to get the job done. I want it all fixed, and I want it cleaned up, and let's go on about our life. You know what I'm saying? That's me. I'm not a golden retriever that goes around trying to pick up everybody that's got a sad-looking face and fix them. I'm just not that way. I love people. Don't say, why are you a pastor? I don't know. I didn't ask for the job. I really didn't. I ran from God like crazy. But he arrested me and said, I want you to preach my gospel. I want you to love these people. And I knew from the first day I was called to preach. I was going to be a pastor, not an evangelist, not a missionary, not a whatever. I was supposed to pastor a church. You know why? Because at my heart, I'm a farmer. That's all I ever knew till I was 18 years old, was riding a John Deere tractor. And farmers plant things and watch them grow. And all my life, I've been planting and watching things grow. And the patience it takes to watch something grow is the hard part about pastoring and farming and life and family. Because when the cotton first comes up or the sprouts come out of the ground, they're growing and they're so pretty, but then you got those wilting days of August when everything just dries up and burns around it. You got that poor little cotton stalk out there where the leaves just droop like this. Its roots about this long in the ground, no kidding. Sometimes 8 feet deep. That's the only way cotton can survive in West Texas. It goes way down to hit the moisture, subsoil. And the leaves are up here just wilted like this. And you think, oh, is it ever going to pass? You just pray for a shower of rain or anything. And you think, we're going to lose it all. So you don't go out and pull the cotton up because it's drying up and because it's wilted. You just leave it alone. Just let it sit there. And this is the way it is with moms. When we're young and industrious and, when we're 8 years old, mama knows everything. By the time we're 16, she knows nothing. And then when we're 26, she knows more than I thought she did. Now we need her again. And we want her to tell us, how do you burp? How do you change these diapers? Mama, how do you fix the colic? What do you do? But as they grow older and they start taking their teeth and gums out, we get a little bit frustrated with them because they don't do things as easily as they used to. They're not as fast. They walk slower, use a cane or a walker. Their hair's turned white by now. They don't keep a good house anymore because they can't push the vacuum like they used to. They can't clean the window seals. They can't do all the stuff they used to do because age has taken its toll upon them. And we get impatient with them because they need a lot of things now. And we're busy, and we don't have time. But they're still our mothers and our fathers. And now they need us. The roles have changed. The roles have reversed. They call us the sandwich generation. We have children, grandchildren, and we have parents that are aging. And we're trying to take care of the little ones, and we're trying to take care of the old ones. And there's 5 generations in life. 5 generations. So it's difficult to know how to deal with all these generational changes and what's going on. And if we're not careful, we'll become impatient with the older ones, especially. Because they're not as much fun as they used to be. And they just want to sit around all the time and watch TV. We can't go out and play in the yard. We can't go to the lake. We can't do this and that. It's just kind of go sit and watch. But I'm saying this to you because it's important that we are patient with our loved ones. I read this the other day. Here's what it says. Teenagers, it is unfair for you to be more kind, considerate, and patient with your friends and your friend's mother than you are with your own. The only reason she picks you up from school is because you don't want to ride the bus, and if you're 3 minutes late, you rail on her like she's forgotten you. If you treated your friends like you treat your mother, you wouldn't have any friends. And if you treated their mom like you treat yours, their mother wouldn't let them have anything to do with you. Your mom deserves better than that, young people. She's not a rug to wipe your feet on and a place to throw your negative insults. And I'm going to say this to the generation that I'm looking at here today, young and middle-aged too. If we do not speak kindly to our parents, how do you think your kids are going to speak to you when they're your age? Got quiet. Fourthly, we need to love her gratefully. An elementary class was asked one time when they were studying magnetism. The question on the test says, what picks up things? Who am I? And half the class answered, mother. Mother. You know, it doesn't take a lot of effort to say thank you. You can develop a thankful heart and a grateful heart by practicing it. Did you know that? You say thank you to a waiter that comes and serves you a dinner drink or your entree or whatever it is. You say, thanks. But your mom sets the table or your wife sets the table and we don't even give her a nod. It's like, it's about time. And I'm thinking, how rude, how crude, how disrespectful, how ungrateful are we? So the message today is not one of those shouting kind of sermons that you get up and say, boy, he really leveled it today. Boy, he praised God. I want you to understand, we need to know how to love our mothers. You can never love them too much. And I want to come to the final part. We need to love her honorably. And the first word out of someone's mouth is that, well, my mother was not an honorable person. And here's the tough part about Mother's Day. No, not every mother is honorable. Not every mother has a great character. Not every mother was a great mom to you. You see, there's a whole lot more to being a mother than giving birth. And we've got a lot of angry kids in Oklahoma today because mom is not in the picture, and neither is dad. Oklahoma ranks about at the top of the list in the United States of grandparents raising kids. Did you know that? Grandparents raising grandchildren. Now I have 3 great-grandchildren, or three wonderful grandchildren, not great-grandchildren, 3 wonderful. I don't necessarily want to raise those kids. I can't keep up with them. But we've got thousands of grandparents in Oklahoma raising their grandchildren because mom is not there. She's done something, or she has abandoned them, or she's somewhere else, and these children can't understand that. Now, if you were in a situation like that, I understand where you're coming from. But my question as I close this morning is, how long are we going to carry that anger and bitterness against a mother who failed us? Because sometimes moms make grave mistakes, and we do things we wish we'd never done, or we didn't do something that we wish we had done. But we need to love her honorably. Ephesians 6:2 says, honor your mother. And in Genesis chapter 3, verse 20, Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all the living. None of us would be here today if it wasn't for our moms. She gave us birth. She gave life to us. Your dad had a little bitty part of that, but she's the one that did all the work. She went through all the morning sickness. She went through all the labor pains. She went through all the recovery time. She went through all the nursing. She went through all the baby raising. All of that she did for us. It reminded me of a story. When the Lord created mothers, it was on his 6th day, and he was working overtime by now. And an angel came to him and says, Lord, you're sure doing a lot of fiddling around with this one. And the Lord replied, have you seen the specs on this order? She has to be completely washable, but not plastic. She has to have 180 moving parts, all replaceable. She runs on black coffee and leftovers. She has a lap that disappears when she stands up, a kiss that can cure anything from a broken leg to a disappointing love affair, and 6 pairs of hands. And the angel said, Lord, 6 pairs of hands? No way. Oh, he said, it's not the hands that are causing me problems. He said, it's the 3 pair of eyes that she has that's my problem. 1 pair that sees through closed doors and says, what are you kids doing in there? When she already knows. Another pair in her head that sees what she shouldn't, but what she needs to know. And of course, the ones in front of her that look at the child when he goofs up and says, I understand and I still love you, without so much as even uttering a word. I'm so close to creating something like myself, it's unbelievable, he said. Already, I have one who heals herself when she is sick, can feed a family of 6 on a pound of hamburger meat, and gets a 9-year-old to stand under the shower. Not only can she think, but she can reason, and she can comprehend. And finally, the angel bent over and ran his finger across the cheek of this mother, and he says, Lord, there's a leak here. And he says, no, it's not a leak. That's a tear. He said, what's that for? And the Lord replied, it's for joy and sadness. It's for disappointment and pain and loneliness and pride and all the countless emotions that come with being a mother. And the Lord said, and the angel said, Lord, you're a genius. And with a somber look on his face, he looked at the angel and he says, I didn't put that tear there. It just came natural. I wonder how many mothers have cried and no one ever knew because you would hide your sorrow and your feelings from your family because you didn't want them to be disturbed about what was going on in you. The strongest people I have ever met are mothers. The strongest. They have more courage than any man I know. They can take more than any of us You say, oh, you're patronizing. And no, I'm not. I wouldn't trade places with my wife for $1 million, for $10 million. They have the most thankless job of any human being on the planet. They do things that nobody even appreciates them doing, and they do it without even questioning why. It's because God made them that way. They are just who they are because it comes natural with them. So I think the least we can do today is to love these people, to show them, to tell them, to touch them, to be patient with them, to be thankful for them, to honor them, because they're the greatest people on the planet. You know why I know that? Because God chose to remove them one step from the earth. They were taken out of something already alive, and God made a special person out of the rib of Adam and gave him back to us, gave her back to us. So, Mom, I love you. We all do. We don't show it enough. We don't appreciate you enough. We're not patient enough with you. Please forgive us for our foolishness and for our mistakes and for our neglect, because you deserve better than what you get many times. I want to ask you to bow your heads with me. I'm not going to ask you to come to the altar this morning. I just want you to just sit there a moment and think about what I've shared. And if there's things that I have mentioned today or that God has brought to your attention that you need to take care of, why don't you start today doing it? There's no better time that I know than now to start practicing how to take care and how to love our mothers.